What is going on, guys? Welcome into the Fantasy Slant, which is brought to you by Pro Football Focus, and it's powered by DraftKings.com. I am your host, Mike Tagliere. Alongside me, I have my co-host, Kevin Cole. Kevin, you want to say hello?
Hi, how's it going, guys?
All right, so we are here with you guys. Today is the day. It's NFL opening day, opening night, I should say. Apparently, we have some storms headed in. We're going to talk a little bit about that game. We're going to talk about every single game this week. Kevin and I are going to cover the players that you should not start, as well as some in-between players that you could take a chance on if you're looking for some upside in some of your plays. But obviously, it starts here with opening day. We're here. It is taking place in New England tonight. The Steelers and the Patriots. Now, obviously, both these teams are missing some of their key players, including the Steelers missing Pouncey, missing Le'Veon Bell, missing Martavis Bryant, the Patriots missing LeGarrette Blount, who's suspended for week 1. Brandon LaFell's out. There are so many players missing from this game, but regardless, it's NFL action, and we are ready for it. We are beyond ready for it, I would think. Before I get into that, I should mention, if you guys have any sit-start questions that we do not cover in the podcast today, you can go ahead and follow us on Twitter. Kevin and I are both very active on there. You can follow him at Cole_Kev. And myself at Mike Tagliere NFL. Obviously, you can see below our names right here. But Kevin, give me some of your thoughts on the Patriots and Steelers game that's going on tonight.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting matchup. I think that most people, if they have some of the major players there, so we're talking about Big Ben, Tom Brady, Antonio Brown, someone like that. I mean, you're starting those guys every single week, so it's not really a question of whether you're going to start them or not. Julian Edelman probably also falls into that category. But you have a few sneaky guys that are really interesting. I mean, the first guy that comes to mind is Danny Amendola. He's a guy that you probably wasn't even drafted a couple of weeks ago. Now he's starting to get drafted a lot of places. Brandon LaFell is out. He's on PUP, so he's going to miss the first 6 games of the season. Amendola is really going to be the second wide receiver target there for Tom Brady. And if they decide they want to just pour it on in this game, and they certainly could, the Steelers' pass defense is probably going to be pretty poor. He's a guy that could get a lot of targets, and he's a pretty similar player to Julian Edelman. And he's someone who kind of came on in the end of last year. So I think he's an interesting play. The big question mark here probably for both teams is what's going to go on in the backfield. I mean, you have D'Angelo Williams, who's going to sub in for Le'Veon Bell this week 1. He could be a workhorse. He could be an interesting play, although if they're down a lot, he might not get a lot of touchdown potential there. But he's a guy you at least could get a workhorse week out of him. And then the other backfield, who really knows what's going to happen? You have Jonas Gray getting cut. Blunt is out this week. So you're going to have Brandon Bolden and probably Dion Lewis as the two guys that are going to be carrying the load there. Who's going to be doing what? It's tough to say. You have a few other guys who could mix in and snap in passing downs like Cadet. So I would say Bolden's probably the safest play amongst those guys, but you really have no idea what this is. This is like normal Belichick. You don't know what's going to happen, and this is Belichick squared. You really don't know what's going to happen. So there could be an interesting play there. I think Bolden's probably the safest there, but who knows which guy is going to come out on top.
Right, and that's the thing is in week 1, the last thing I want to do is place my bets on a Patriots running back. I mean, if you're in like a DFS thing and you just want some upside, I guess I could understand doing that in a Thursday night game, but I'm probably staying away from all the Patriots running backs. Amendola is someone that interests me a lot. I agree with you. There's only so many targets that you could throw to, and right now it's going to be Gronk number 1, Edelman number 2, and then Amendola number 3. Aaron Dobson is kind of the dark horse there. But we know that he's kind of faltered in the past, and we don't know if Brady and Belichick trust him, but I guess it's a good thing that he's stuck on the roster this long. So that's kind of like a dark horse for me in fantasy this year altogether, Aaron Dobson. They don't have that big guy with LaFell being benched, or not benched, but out for the first at least 6 weeks. So that's something to keep an eye on. My D'Angelo Williams, he doesn't excite me very much, but he is going to be, it's almost like an Alfred Blue type start for me. That's kind of how I view D'Angelo Williams in week 1. He's a safe play. If you got some other guys in your lineup for upside, roll with them. But that's going to pretty much wrap up what we want to do. We want to make sure we cover every game, so we don't want to stick on one for too long. But the next game I want to talk about is my beloved Chicago Bears. I'm actually going to be at that game. I'm not expecting a Bears victory by any means. As a matter of fact, I think the over-under is like the 4th or 5th highest in Vegas right now in this game. I have no idea why, unless they think the Packers are really going to do what Mike McCarthy said and whoop the Bears. You know what? He's saying that it's a rivalry, that it's coming back. Aaron Rodgers, he scored in 11 of 16 possessions against the Bears last year. They've arguably gotten worse. They've lost some of their veteran players. They've moved to a 3-4. There's so many question marks right now. I'm all over Rodgers. I'm loving almost every player on the Packers team. How are you feeling about this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great matchup. They should be up a bunch. You're really going to have to choose who you love the most on the Packers this week, because Eddie Lacy is obviously a very strong play this week. They're a 7-point favorite. If they pour it on, they could run them a lot in the second half. Obviously, there are a little bit more question marks at wide receiver with Jordy Nelson out and then Cobb ailing. Devontae Adams is going to be an extremely popular play if you're looking at DFS or something like that, because of the fact that he's kind of near the minimum salary in a couple of different places. So he's an interesting play, although if I had someone else that I could start in his spot, I might do that, although you probably don't have anyone who's as strong as him to start in his spot. But if you do, I might do that just to see how things shake out with that wide receiver core. And if you look over at Chicago side, it looks like Alshon Jeffrey is on track to play. If he is on track to play, I think I'd go ahead and roll with him. I think it's something where they've just been kind of slow playing that injury and letting it work its way out with the intention of going ahead and playing him week 1. They never signed anybody else. So I think he's going to play. If he doesn't play, of course, Eddie Royal just pops up as a really great sneaky play that week. Aaron Rodgers, he'll be great. Jay Cutler, maybe not so good. So, but you don't know. I mean, there's definitely some plays here, but we're looking mostly, I think, on the Packers side of the ball.
Correct. And Jay Cutler's been awful against the Packers in his lifetime. He's just awful. We're just going to leave it at that. Now, Eddie Lacy is someone that I know everybody's jumping on. They're saying he's a great DFS play and all that, but I just wanted to confirm that what I saw last year is that Eddie Lacy didn't have very much success against the Bears last year. Now, I know they've switched some things around, moving to a 3-4. It's going to change some pieces, but you can argue that their front seven may have gotten a little bit better, although their corners they're very suspect to me. But last year, Eddie Lacy, week 4, 17 carries for 48 yards. He scored a touchdown. And then week 10, 14 carries for 50 yards, no touchdowns, but he did catch 68 yards and a touchdown. So he was touchdown dependent, basically. So he's not as good as you would have thought he would have been against the Bears, and because the Bears were just straight up awful last year. But Lacy is someone that, yes, I like, but here's the thing. Lacy, we know what they do with him. If the Packers jump out to that early lead, they're gonna give some of the carries to Starks. I could see it kind of like a 60-40 split, just because they don't want to put all that mileage on Lacy's legs. So I'm probably fading actually on Eddie Lacy, but I'm buying on the entire passing game. Like Devontae Adams, he's cheap. I've touted him for a long time. I believe he's a top 15 wide receiver play for week 1, along with Randall Cobb. Those are both studs. Richard Rodgers, I'm curious to see how they use him, but I'm going to see it firsthand. So I'm going to witness the massacre in Chicago firsthand. I'm calling that one. I said 31-13, maybe 31-17. I just don't see it being very close.
Well, try to stick it out to the end there.
Yeah, I'm going to be in a rush to get back home to watch the afternoon games. But no. So the next game I want to cover is another one. This one, it's not a really exciting one when it comes to fantasy, but we're going to cover it. It's the Chiefs at the Texans. Now, the Texans, obviously, we know that they're a high-powered defense. J.J. Watt is going to wreak havoc up the middle. And the Chiefs, they're going to try and gadget ways to use Jamal Charles, Jeremy Maclin, apparently. What's your takes on this game?
Yeah, there's not a lot of exciting options here. I mean, Alfred Blue is somebody you can expect to get a decent workload, although he hasn't been extremely efficient. This is a pretty low over-under type of game. It's basically a pick-em where both teams are expected to score around 20 points, so we're not talking about a huge amount here. Macklin's somebody who I think might be a little bit overvalued at this point, only because he was fluttering around in the mid rounds, and then in a couple of preseason games, he got targeted a lot. I'll say that he got targeted a lot, and he started to move up boards. I see him jumping ahead of guys who I like a little bit better, maybe someone like Brandon Marshall, at least on the season. And I still think we have to see what's going to happen here, because Alex Smith has never done a very good job turning his wide receivers into fantasy producers. He's done a much better job with tight ends and with Vernon Davis in the past. So I think Kelsey's a good play there. DeAndre Hopkins should see a lot of targets, so he's another good play. I'd probably fade both quarterbacks. Play Alfred Blue if you need someone who's just going to give you a lot of work, and of course you're always playing Jamal Charles.
Yeah, you're never going to sit Jamal Charles, Travis Kelsey. Those guys are locks in lineups. Jeremy Maclin, I got a feeling he might disappoint a little bit. I think this is going to be a lower scoring game. And if you figure that Charles, he should score a touchdown in here, whether it be receiving or rushing. And then you look at Kelsey with better than, I'd say a 50% chance of scoring. I'm not a huge Maclin supporter yet. I understand in the preseason they used him in more ways than I guess even I thought they would. But I want to see how it translates to games when they're playing for real, and these teams are looking for those plays. And there's just I'm just not very excited about the Chiefs. I do have them winning that game 17-16. So like you said, right around 20 points. It's just not a very exciting game. The next one, it's another shocker here. The Cleveland Browns at the New York Jets. Now, obviously, we got Ryan Fitzpatrick starting. We should get some more consistency out of him, out of Marshall, Decker. But Joe Hayden, I was looking at one of the tools. Actually, I'm gonna promote PFF right here. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to go to. If you don't have PFF Gold right now, you need to sign up for it. Like I can't explain this enough. I used to be a novice fantasy fan where I would just kind of rely on my own things and not necessarily pay for a subscription. But when it comes to $29.99 for what you get, the wide receiver cornerback matchup tool is worth it in itself. Like Mike Clay put it all together where you are able to see exactly where a corner lines up, the percentage amount of time where a wide receiver does, who's matching up with who. And it's telling us that Joe Hayden is going to be matching up with Brandon Marshall quite a bit this week. Are you playing Brandon Marshall in any lineups?
I would still think about playing Marshall. I agree Hayden's been a dominant cover cornerback, but I don't know if I would stray away from Marshall. Marshall's just someone who just constantly gets targeted no matter where he's gone his entire career. It could change. I mean, it's possible that they have Eric Decker there, but if you think about it, outside of Decker and outside of Marshall, I'm not sure who they're going to throw the ball to on that team. They really have nothing at tight end. The rest of the wide receiver spots are a big question mark. There might be okay volume in the passing game, I think, with Chan Gailey as the offensive coordinator now. So I would still probably be playing Brandon Marshall if I had him. I doubt you're going to have another option that's any better. He's a big physical guy, so I think he could probably still get some work here, even if he's being covered by Hayden. Now the rest of the matchup, there's a lot of question marks. Now Decker, I mentioned as somebody who, he could be freed up because of this. So he would be a sneaky good play of someone to put in your lineup if Marshall ends up getting the Hayden treatment. You can't really start either quarterback. I don't know who you can even start on Cleveland, period. I mean, the only thing that's interesting is Terrence West is gone. So you have some clarity in the backfield there. You have Crowell, who looks like he's going to start. But then it seems like I was actually I got most positive on Duke Johnson with West leaving town because they drafted him this year. In the third round. He's a pretty good prospect. He's a guy who can catch the ball out of the backfield. Crowell hasn't really excelled at that. And Crowell, I mean, let's remember, I don't think that he was an undrafted free agent. He played pretty well last year, but I don't think the coaching staff is in love with him. So it sounds like Duke Johnson's out of concussion protocol. And I'd be really interested to see what it's going to do this week and how they're going to end up using them. I think he'll get more work than people think, and he could be a play moving forward, but you could probably got to stay on wait and see at this point. And Chris Ivory in the other backfield, I mean, he's someone who could get quite a bit of work this week. So I think you're going to fire him up if you have him in your lineup.
Yeah, no, and I'm with you on the whole Duke Johnson thing, but here's the way I view Duke Johnson. I know a lot of people are talking about him possibly being a workhorse and like moving into the role because they don't like Crowell, they cut West, and while I like him more because of that, I just drafted him in a going deep league. I like him as a PPR format play. I'm not a huge standard guy on Duke Johnson just because I kind of view this as the Joique Bell and Reggie Bush of the last 2 years in that offense. While Crowell is going to steal the goal line work, he's going to see the majority, we'll say 70% of the carries, and Duke Johnson's going to be that Reggie Bush type where he's going to catch a whole lot of passes. Or you could even view it as Joique Bell, Amir Abdullah this year, but in a worse offense, in an offense
where a lot worse off.
Yeah, where they don't have any options like to take away attention out of that. Like obviously Detroit has Calvin and Golden Tate outside. That's why I like Abdullah so much, is the guy is going to see 6-7 man fronts quite a bit, and he's going to be lined up out wide in the slot. There's a lot to like about him, but when it comes to Duke Johnson, I don't worry about necessarily his skill set. I worry more about the situation and no scoring chances. That's why I'm in a wait and see mode with Duke Johnson where they play him.
No, I think that definitely makes sense. And one thing that'll be interesting is to see how effective they can be running the ball. Obviously, the Jets have a good front, but They also have Alex Mack back in the lineup. Now, it may have been coincidental, but when their center went down, their all-pro center went down last year, the whole running game just went to crap. To pardon my French. And it was really like night and day between before and after. So now he'll be back in the lineup. So it is possible they could start to establish a good running game this year. And if that happens, like I said, in future weeks, these are guys that you can look at. But for this week, I'd probably keep him on your bench.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the thing is that Chris Ivory and Isaiah Crowell, they're similar backs to me right now. Like I know a lot of people, and like myself included, we talked about it before, is that we were fading Crowell. We didn't want to draft him on our teams. We felt dirty when we did. When they cut West, it made me feel a lot better about the situation, and that I kind of view him as that guy that's guaranteed, 14 to 16 carries a game. That's kind of how I view him, and he's the goal line back. So I do like Crowell. If you can get him for cheap right now, if you could trade somebody like Devonta Freeman for him, I'm all over that. If you could trade somebody like, I don't know, Joyke Bell for him, I would do that. I think Joyke Bell's being phased out of that offense right now. But the next game is one that I was curious to hear your take on. Now, I had took a look at some early projections. I did my own personal ones. Andrew Luck and the Colts are headed to Buffalo to play the Bills, the Rex Ryan-led Buffalo Bills. Now, the Bills last year were a top-notch defense. There were some really, really, really good quarterbacks that went in there and did not do anything. Like Peyton Manning was held to his first touchdownless games. I think it was 51 games in a row or something like that where he had a touchdown. It was ended in that game against Buffalo. Aaron Rodgers struggled against them. Tom Brady struggled against them. There are so many teams that struggled against them towards the end of last year. Rex Ryan, you could argue, the defensive guru that he is only going to make that pass defense more. He's going to do those pass rushes that are more exotic, and he'll find a way to get to the quarterback. Now, the Colts, on the other hand, they've kind of changed up things. I feel like they want to slow down their offense just a little bit when they went out and signed Frank Gore, Andre Johnson. Those guys are not young chickens anymore. But my take to you, Kevin, Andrew Luck, are you going to sit him on a fantasy team this week? I mean, I understand most people wasted a second, third round draft pick on him, but the Bills, looking at it last year, they allowed just one quarterback to score over 18 points last year and just 3 to score over 16 points. Like, it's not a good matchup at all. It's in Buffalo. How do you feel about Andrew Luck and their pass game this week?
No, I mean, you kind of laid out the rationale for why you have to start him. I mean, if you spent a second or third round at the latest pick on Andrew Luck, I don't think there's any way that you're sitting him. And if you look at I always like to look at the over-under and what it's saying about the team. I mean, they are a favorite, so it's not as if that they're a dog here. So if they're playing with the lead, that's always good for a quarterback. The over-under suggests they're going to score a little bit over 24 points. Now, it's not a huge total, but it's not it's not a small total by any means. He could get some points on with his legs too, which I think helps for Andrew Luck. So I don't expect a huge game from him, but I think you're probably going to have to start him here because if you drafted Andrew Luck, I'm not sure who else you're going to have on your team that you're going to want to elevate above him.
I'm thinking somebody like a Sam Bradford or somebody that you could have drafted later on. Like Bradford, obviously, as the drafts got later and later and closer to the season, Sam Bradford started going. He went ahead of guys like Matt Ryan, Brady, Stafford, like all these guys. Bradford was going in front of towards, coming up on the season, which was just crazy. The preseason obviously did that. I'm a Bradford fan, but over those guys,
if you have Bradford, I mean, if you also spent a pick on him, I think that's a very favorable a matchup. I mean, if you have Bradford, if you have Romo, if you have Matt Bryan on the other end of that Bradford matchup, there's a lot of guys that you could probably elevate above him. Of course, Aaron Rodgers, but no one has Rodgers and Luck, I don't think, on their own team, unless they're coming with some new strategy that we haven't heard of before. So, I'm not saying that I would start him over regardless of who else you have on your team, but it's just probably most teams' lineups aren't going to have another startable option this week. But there are a lot of good guys that have some pretty solid matchups.
No, it's true, and that's all I was asking. Is just that it's one of those things where when you lock yourself in, you got to look at those matchups, and there's going to be these matchups every now and then where you're not going to feel so great about it. And if you have another good option, I'm not shying away from benching Andrew Luck in week 1. And I understand it's not a popular take, but it's just I wouldn't feel comfortable playing against the Bills is all in Buffalo. So the next matchup is the Dolphins at the Redskins. The Dolphins. Obviously, everybody's expecting big things from this offense this year. The Redskins secondary is awful, but the run defense is really good. So while this may not be a great matchup for Lamar Miller, it might be a good one for the receiving options in Miami, no?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. It's interesting because I am definitely a draft defense at the very end of your fantasy draft type of guy. But the Miami Dolphins were a really intriguing option. They have a lot of great matchups, this being the first of them. Cousins has been a turnover machine. So I think, I think that it's an interesting matchup between these two teams. Like you mentioned, the Washington defense is probably a little bit more stout up front than they are in the air. But there are a lot of different receiving options for Miami. That's my only question mark when it comes to which Miami receiver or tight end Jordan Cameron is gonna come through on any particular week, because Tannehill has those options. Is it going to be Cameron? Is it going to be Landry? Kenny Still seems like he may have been somewhat phased out at this point. Devontae Parker supposedly gonna play. So you've got a lot of different options there. I think Landry and Cameron are obviously pretty safe. And Tannehill is probably the guy who benefits the most, being able to spread the ball around to quite a few different weapons.
Agreed. And if you missed my column this week on the Fantasy Stock Market Watch, I talked about Alfred Morris and the fact that you should sell him. I own him in one league. I thought he was going to be a safe RB2, like almost like a top 15 running back that didn't have a high ceiling, but he had a very high floor. And now with Cousins starting, man, not only am I down on him, but if you go to trade him after this week, his value is going to be down even more, considering he's facing Miami's front. I mean, they look really good. Their secondary is a little bit shaky. They're a little old. They lost Delmas for the year. That's where Washington can make up for it this week. I think Deshaun Jackson's kind of like that boom or bust play, but we already know that about him. We do. Pierre Garçon did never produce so much with Kirk Cousins at quarterback, so I'm kind of avoiding Pierre Garçon. Deshaun Jackson is more of a flex play than anything for me, but Alfred Morris is somebody.
Yeah. I think Alf, I mean, it's interesting because he's been extremely productive as far as anyone right out of the gate, as far as rushing is concerned. But when it comes to a running back, there aren't opportunity for multiple running backs in one scheme. I mean, you have Matt Jones there, and he was drafted by this staff. So when a staff has their guy that they've drafted, they're going to look for an excuse to get him more and more time over someone who's kind of obviously Alfred Morris burst onto the scene as part of the Shanahan regime. So, if Alf starts to struggle a bit, you have Matt Jones you can put in there, and also Matt Jones can catch the ball a lot better. So you combine all that together, Alf is someone who could get phased out over the first few weeks of the season.
It's kind of true, and that's the sad part, and that's why I'm saying trade for what you can for right now with him, just because I just don't trust it. If he doesn't score this week, I don't think he scores 7 fantasy points. I mean, obviously, Cousins is not going to force defenses to back away from Alfred Morris. That's just not going to happen. But that's going to wrap up basically what I wanted to touch on that game. The next one we're going to talk about is the Carolina Panthers at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, this is a game where I could honestly see Jacksonville pulling off an upset. Now, the Panthers, I think Peanut Tillman, I think he passed his concussion test. I don't know if the other corner did. His name is escaping me right now. But there was talks that they might be down without 2 corners in that game. Now, it is in Jacksonville as well. Jacksonville's going to be without Julius Thomas, but Allen Robinson's been receiving plenty of hype. But I think the one that a lot of people have been asking me about on Twitter the most has been TJ Yeldon and whether or not they should play him this week. I'm in the camp that it's going to be somewhat of a timeshare to start the year. Not much. I don't think that Denard Robinson takes like a 50-50 split or anything like that. But I could see something like Yeldon getting maybe 13 carries with Robinson getting 7 and obviously some more receptions than Yeldon. They did say that Yeldon's the starting back this week. How would you feel about putting him in there, just tossing him in there against Carolina and seeing how he does? Are you going to start TJ Yeldon at all?
If you have him and you don't have another workhorse type back, then I would definitely start him. I mean, it's not a great matchup, but again, this is something where they spent a lot of draft capital on him this year. He was drafted at the beginning of the second round. And if you think about it, that's actually a higher draft pick than any running back the previous 2 years. I mean, Sankey and Gio Bernard were the 2 highest running backs in the previous years, and they weren't taken till later in the second round. So even though he wasn't the first running back off the board this year, he was a high running back draft pick in the context of where running backs are being taken nowadays. And I feel like a lot of these guys, when they're ready to go, he played in the preseason, they'll stuff him in there and they'll just work him. I have a feeling, because I don't think there are huge concerns with how much he can get. He can play in the pass game. So I think he's a good play. Although this isn't the best matchup, but unless you have another guy you can start in his stead, I would throw him in there.
Yeah, I had some people asking me about Danny Woodhead and if they should start Woodhead or him. In a PPR, it's a little bit different, but in a standard league, I'll take my shot on Yeldon there. But the thing for the big play for me is Jonathan Stewart. If you drafted Jonathan Stewart, you're playing him this week. You're going to play him while he's healthy. If Jonathan Stewart can stay healthy for the entire season, he's going to be a top 15 running back. I truly believe that. And the Jacksonville Jaguars last year, they had 4 games in which they gave up multiple touchdowns to a running back. So I am all aboard Jonathan Stewart this week. Love him as a top 12 play. I think this game it's going to be a little bit slower paced, but him and Newton, I think, are actually pretty solid plays because I just don't think there's anybody else around them to take production. So I think that those two are going to account for most of the production on the ground, and that's where Carolina, they kind of make their money. So moving on to the next game that we're going to talk about is the Seattle Seahawks at the St. Louis Rams. Cam Chancellor, he's continuing his holdout. He's not going to play. I don't necessarily think that it really impacts this game at all because Nick Foles, I don't think anybody in the NFL is worried about Nick Foles. I don't know why the Rams signed him to an extension. I just think he was a product of the system. I understand 27 touchdowns, 2 picks. That's pretty impressive. I'm not going to lie about that, but it's just not somebody that I'm even going to consider him or any of his passing options against Seattle. Now, the question mark is Trey Mason. We don't know if he's going to play. We obviously know Todd Gurley's out. Benny Cunningham. I know there's a lot of people out there preaching him as a PPR start this week. Are you trusting that? Do you believe that there's a legit shot that he finishes as a top 20 PPR running back this week?
I think there's definitely a chance. I mean, of course, it's contingent upon Mason being out. The thing is, during the preseason, I did see them use Mason a little bit more in the pass game than they did last year, where it was basically everything when the pass game went to Cunningham, and that's what made him a viable option some weeks, including against Seattle. Look, he had some decent starts last week. So if Mason is out, I think he's actually one of the better plays in a PPR league. We're talking about absolutely no cost going into it. So he's interesting, but it's all contingent on Mason right now.
Yeah, and that's the thing is you could see one of those games out of Cunningham. If Mason's out, you could see one of those 19 touch 60 yards for Cunningham, but he might have 5-6 catches, which is going to boost you in a PPR, which is not bad out of a flex spot. And he's available on 95% of the waiver wires out there. Obviously, Marshawn Lynch is going to be a start. Russell Wilson, I just because of his rushing, I still have him as a borderline top 10 option this week, even facing a tough St. Louis defense. But Marshawn Lynch has been awful against St. Louis in the last few matchups they've had. So Lynch is someone, obviously you're not going to sit him. You can't sit him, but just don't expect too much out of him this week. The next matchup is this one. This one's really of interest to me, and I'm curious to get your take on it because this is one where I've seen both sides of it, and I can understand both sides of it. But the Saints at Arizona. Now, has Arizona's defense faded so much where we believe in Drew Brees as a top 5 quarterback in this matchup, or do we believe that Arizona is going to keep him in check and keep this at their pace? Where they're not letting Drew Brees run up and down the field. Brandon Cooks, huge upside this week, huge. I do like him. Coleman's going to be a flyer, but Michael Floyd might play, might not play. There's a lot of question marks surrounding it. What are your big starts from this week, and what are the big sits from this week?
Well, I mean, Spiller's out, so Mark Ingram is really your guy there. He did extremely well last year when he had the backfield to himself. I mean, Kyrie Robinson could mix in, but it's difficult to say how much he's going to mix in. He's probably has a skill set that's a little bit more similar to Ingram than to Spiller. So there's someone that they could turn it over to Ingram. I guess the one question is going to be from a game script perspective. They are the underdog going in over there. The Cardinals do have a pretty good defensive front. So we'll have to see what ends up happening here. As far as guys that I like Brandon Cooks. It really hasn't provided a lot of clarity over the offseason who Drew Brees is going to throw the ball other than to Cooks. Is it going to be Colston? Is it going to be Brandon Coleman, who's kind of moving up the ranks? They got Ben Watson at tight end, which is kind of a non-factor. He's 35 years old, I think. So I think Cooks is probably a really great play here. I think Brees is a good play. You're not going to have weather issues there. It's in Arizona, and we're talking about the first week of the season, but it's not as good of a play as when you see him in the dome. The rest of the team, as far as we're looking at New Orleans, I think it's kind of difficult to project at this point. And if you go over to the other side, Carson Palmer is a pretty popular play for a late round quarterback guy. He's a favorite. He's at home. I think he'll have a pretty good matchup. And as far as how they're going to distribute the ball to the different receivers, I'm not really sure at this point, so I guess I'm probably a little bit lower on the different Cardinals receivers because I think you have 2 and then potentially 3 guys that could all kind of work against each other. And then again in the backfield, you got Ellington, you got David Johnson, and you got Chris Johnson. So I'm not sure how things are going to work out there. So on the Arizona side, I think it's really Carson Palmer and then maybe one of those other guys if you want to take a risk on how big of a slice they'll get.
Well, I believe in John Brown this week, and I think they're going to pick up where they left off in the preseason. I think it was showing the chemistry that Palmer and him built this offseason. I think Fitz is aging. He's like one of those guys where I'm just not really excited about putting him in my lineup. However, this week it's decent. We know Michael Floyd, if he does play, he might be limited. I'm trying not to start him in any league. I might have to in a league where I start 6 wide receivers. But John Brown, loving it. Now, he lined up, according to the analysis that Mike Clay did, John Brown lined up on the left side of the formation almost 40% of the time, whereas Brandon Browner is the corner that would be covering him on that side of the field. They can take huge advantage of that. Brandon Browner is 6'4". He's a big physical corner. He's good for those bigger receivers, but somebody that's slippery like John Brown, 5'11", he's going to burn them. If they stick Brandon Browner on John Brown on the outside, look out. Like, you're going to see some big plays out of it. They better stick a safety over the top. That's why I'm loving John Brown this week. Fitz, he'll be a decent PPR play. He's got a good shot at a touchdown, but John Brown is the play. If I had to pick one of the Arizona wide receiving core, he's the guy I'm going to do. I also like Ellington. If New Orleans is going to put up some points, Ellington's going to see some targets in the passing game. He's also going to receive anywhere, 13 to 15 carries. New Orleans is known to give up points to running backs. And if you drafted, Andre Ellington like I did to a couple teams, you're going to play him. And you expect him to produce this week. He knows what he's fighting for. He's got a job to win. A job to keep, I should say. And he's finally healthy. So that's one of the more interesting games of the week that I definitely wanted to talk about. But next, though, I wanted to let you guys know, we do have a sponsor that we're going to talk about here just for a moment. It's the start of the season. DraftKings is hosting a $2 million tournament. $2 million for first place. It's actually $10 million for the entire thing, but first place gets $2 million. The second place gets $1 million. All right. Start the season off by winning $2 million week 1. DraftKings.com, America's favorite week 1 fantasy football site. It is the biggest fantasy football contest ever. Like I said, $10 million up in prizes. It is week 1. This is where a lot of the newbies are going to come out. You're going to get a chance to show what you've learned here, what you learned through our website. There is a tool on PFF that you're able to use to maximize your roster. Pick your players, pile up the points, pick up your cash. We want you to fill up your account with cash and never have to refill it again. All right, get started playing right now. Head over to DraftKings.com and use the promo code PFF to play for a free shot at $2 million in the Week 1 Millionaire Maker. Enter PFF for the free entry now at DraftKings.com. Again, that is DraftKings.com. Kevin, have you had a chance to try out our new tool that we have with the DFS Optimizer?
I played around with it. I thought that it actually came up some pretty good, helped really filter my thoughts in for this week.
It did. I came up with my own because I did a similar thing that we did, but what it does is it'll take the projected points, the salaries for the sites, and it'll give you your optimal lineup, like in terms of fantasy points per dollar spent. So I would go through my plays and I'd look on the list. I'm like, oh, this matches up. Obviously, we're seeing eye to eye on this one. So it's a really neat tool. It's one of those things that when I talk about the articles, the insight, all this stuff that you get for $29.99 over the entire season, it's a bargain, guys. But to touch on the next game, this is one of my favorite ones. I believe there are so many fantasy points at stake in this matchup. Kevin, how do you feel about the Lions and the Chargers?
Yeah, this is a pretty interesting matchup. I think when you look at both sides of the ball, you have a lot of viable options. I mean, we're talking about with San Diego, Phillip Rivers. I think he could have a pretty good week. This week he's playing at home, playing at a favorite. You look in the backfield, you have Gordon and Woodhead. Gordon's someone who's definitely been slipping a lot on pretty mediocre preseason play and the expectation that he's not going to be involved that much in the passing game with Woodhead there. But I think he's an interesting guy to put into your lineup and see how well they can run. That Detroit Lions defense might have softened a bit now that Sue has left town. And then when you're talking about the wide receivers, I mean, you have Keenan Allen and Stevie Johnson. Both of them are probably pretty decent plays. It's kind of interesting. You know, of course, Keenan Allen's going much earlier in drafts than Stevie Johnson, but the guys look actually pretty similar. So they could put up similar stat lines this week and both be usable options, although I don't think they're either going to be top options. On the other side of the ball, Matthew Stafford is a guy that, you know, no one's really been able to figure out if he's going to go to the next level or not. He's kind of meandered for a while. And after that great year he had in 2011, everyone's been hoping he's going to take the next step, and it just hasn't happened. But he has been able to produce good output for Calvin Johnson. Golden Tate was just amazing when Calvin Johnson was out last year, but his targets could be limited this year. And in the backfield, I mean, you mentioned it. Amir Abdullah, and I think Amir Abdullah is just a fantastic option this week. Their coaches are talking him up left and right about the passing game and the running game. Joique Bell has missed time, so I think he's a great play to fire into your lineup if you draft him this year.
Yes, and while most people want to fade on, you know, San Diego's passing attack this week, I want to remind you, like Kevin had touched on it, the fact that they lost Sue, they lost Fairley, and the Lions defense faded as a whole last year, like in the second half of the year. The first half of the year, this nugget I found, they gave up three touchdowns to receivers in the first 8 games. Just 3 touchdowns. They were lights out. Detroit's defense was just off the charts good, right? The second half of the season was a little bit different. They gave up 11 touchdowns to wide receivers alone. So add that up with the fact that they lost two of their cogs up the middle. Like, this is not going to be the same defense, and their secondary is going to look even worse because they're not getting as much pressure on the quarterback. I understand they're going to blitz. Rivers, it's nothing new to Rivers. He's actually one of the best quarterbacks in the league under pressure. And he's also got one of my favorite fantasy plays for week 1, a guy that I'm finding a way to get him in my lineup and whatever I'm doing, Stevie Johnson. Antonio Gates is out. Stevie Johnson's going to use his 6'2" frame over the middle. He's going to be that. I really, truly believe that Stevie Johnson can actually end Antonio Gates' career over the first 4 weeks, because I believe that if Phillip Rivers finds his new safety blanket there, it could be the end. Because Stevie Johnson, let's face it, he's younger, he's faster, he's got size. So it's not like Danny Woodhead is going to take it. But Ladarius Green supposedly got banged up at practice, and he might miss the game with a concussion-like symptom. I don't know what's going on there. But on the Detroit side of the ball, Joique Bell is rumored might not play. Amir Abdullah, fantastic start, even if Joique Bell does go. Because if Joique Bell plays, I don't see him getting any more than 8 touches. I really don't see it. And there's going to be the ball spread around. So what does this mean? This means that Matthew Stafford is going to throw the ball 40-plus times. And that's why I am loving Calvin Johnson, my number 1 receiver this week. I have him up for, I think I projected him when going through everything, 9 catches, 127 yards, and a touchdown. Not to say he can't even have more. It's just Calvin Johnson should set the world on fire in week 1, and I'm playing him wherever I can. And daily, obviously, you're playing him in your regular lineups, but that's a matchup that I believe there's a lot of fantasy points to be had. But Calvin and Stevie are 2 guys, and Abdullah are guys that I'm trying to find a way to get into every single lineup I have. Moving on to the Titans at the Bucks. We were talking about this a little bit before we got on air in regards to Bishop Sankey. Kevin had a draft that was going on, and I told him, I said, don't forget to draft, Bishop Sankey. And he laughed and he said, I just can't do it anymore. I'm moving off. It seems like they have no confidence in him. And I get it. I understand it. And so I'm telling people that if Bishop Sankey doesn't get it done this week, I might myself be backing off that, because I believe his back is against the wall. He's playing a defense that's not the greatest run blocking unit. He's got his mobile quarterback that they should be able to get some plays out of him like an option. Terrence West was signed there. If he plays, he doesn't really know the playbook. So there's no reason that he should take Sankey's job right now. Obviously, David Cobb's on the IR. There are so many things adding up right now for Bishop Sankey to have a game. And if I believe in the guy, I believe in him. And I'm sticking with that. I'm playing him. I told someone earlier to play him over Andre Johnson. It was hard to do. I understand it. But I said, if I'm wrong on this one, hate me for it. But I'm sticking with Sankey. I assume that you're not in that same camp anymore. I'm assuming you moved on, Kevin.
Yeah, I have a little bit. I mean, just the preseason usage was just a bit discouraging, because you had McCluster was in there most of the time on 3rd down, and then he was in there for the 2-minute drill. And then you had Antonio Andrews coming in short yardage situations. So that really squeezes a lot of value out of what Sankey can do. Now, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, one of the reasons that I like Sankey as a prospect is the fact that he did it all when he was in college. He was the workhorse. He caught the ball. He did everything. But if they're going to split that role up, it's going to be pretty difficult to see what he's going to be able to do. And I think it's just difficult this week. But on the other side of the ball, I think this is one week where you can fire up Doug Martin because they're at home, and they're a favorite. And Doug Martin, I think they've only won one game the last couple of years that Doug Martin's played in. So he hasn't had a lot of good running situations. This should be a good one for him. So I would fire him up.
I agree. Doug Martin is a fantastic play, and part of that comes to the fact is that Mike Evans might not play. He still hasn't practiced. Word out of there is that it's looking like he's not going to play. Lovie Smith is known to hold out players if they don't get on the practice field. But if he does not play, Vincent Jackson's a must-play. Vincent Jackson moves into top 12 territory. He's a guy that you got to find a way to get into your lineup. But I see this as a low-scoring game where both running backs should get opportunities to show themselves against, not the greatest of defenses, which is why I'm sticking with Sankey. Kendall Wright could be a decent play as well. But yes, we'll pay attention to that. Obviously, on Twitter, we give injury report updates, things like that in regards to Mike Evans. So stay tuned on that. If you own Evans, even if you have him, he's got a fantastic matchup, but it's just hard to trust somebody that hasn't practiced at all, has no chemistry with the quarterback. Winston still has yet to connect with Mike Evans on a pass in the preseason. So it was just it's something that I don't think these two have totally gotten on the same page, whereas Vincent Jackson has. So it's a situation to watch. So Mike Evans, just keep your eye out for that one.
Now, Mike, would you play either of these rookie quarterbacks here week one?
Mariota is an interesting option. If you're in a 2-quarterback league, absolutely. But if you're talking like a DFS thing, it's funny because I was doing the DFS numbers for Yahoo, and Mariota came up as a good value this week. I actually do like him, but I just can't play him over. I mean, I'm guessing you drafted one of the top 14 guys, unless if you're playing a streamer strategy. Yeah, I take my shot at Mariota. I think he's looked poised. I'm usually against quarterbacks starting when they're rookies. I think Winston might be one of those guys where I just think he might hurt a little bit from starting too early. But Mariota looks poised in the pocket. Like, he just doesn't look like he's got happy feet. He looks like he's been there. That's why I'm going to trust Mariota more than I would trust Winston right now.
I'm with you.
Yeah. So basically, the next matchup is one of the best. If you have AJ Green on any of your fantasy teams, you need to get him in your lineup, and you need to just sit back and enjoy the show. He's going to be going up against DJ Hayden, who graded out as -2 in Pro Football Focus's numbers, and he has one of the best matchups in the league heading into this one. Now, the concern is that Cincinnati blows them out, and they don't even need to throw the ball, and AJ Green ends up with a line of 4 catches, 40 yards, and a touchdown. That's always a possibility, but he's got a fantastic matchup. Jeremy Hill should go off, but where my money's at on this one, I can't wait to see Amari Cooper in a full game. How about you?
Yeah, I think it'll be very exciting. I mean, if you watch in particular the third preseason game when they were playing against Arizona, he was matched up against Patrick Peterson, and he looked amazing out there. I mean, he was just being heavily targeted. So in particular in PPR leagues, Cooper could be one of those guys that produces value, even if he's not scoring a lot of touchdowns and even if he's not stretching the field. I mean, for James Jones, when he played last year, he was getting targeted a lot, and he had a lot of catches too. So this is basically going to be that type of situation, except for obviously we're talking about the talent differential being as wide as the Grand Canyon. So Amari Cooper is going to be used. He's going to be throwing out a lot, and I think it's going to be very, very exciting to see what he can do.
I agree, and it's funny because Amari Cooper was somebody, as the drafts came closer and the more I seen him in game action, I loved him before. I even seen him in game action. I feel like he was the most NFL-ready wide receiver I'd seen in some time. He's like that Anquan Bolden feel to him, but his routes, man, he spun Patrick Peterson around. He's going to do it all year long, and it's funny because Mike Salfino, I was talking to him on Twitter, and he said that he believes that Cooper, it's a realistic possibility that the guy sees 180, 190 targets in this offense because of the way that Derek Carr, even with Devontae Adams back in college, the way he almost locked onto him, that connection that he had. So I really can't say that I disagree with him. I mean, if you don't see Cooper getting at least 10 targets a game, where are they going? Michael Crabtree?
Yeah, yeah. Crabtree's one of these guys where I always find it humorous that when you'll read these blurbs about what's going on in training camp, you say, "Oh, Crabtree scored a touchdown. Crabtree this, Crabtree that," and then you see him during the game, and he just looks like he looks like an old man out there in comparison to Amari Cooper. So I don't think he's going to be much of a worry. Obviously, they don't have much at tight end. They don't necessarily throw the ball to running backs a lot. So Cooper's going to be the man, and I assume Carr's going to be locked in on him.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, and that's why I'm excited to see Amari Cooper in action. And obviously, the Raiders aren't the greatest of defensive teams, where they might be behind in a lot of games where they're throwing, which just leads to more love Cooper, love him, love him, love him. If you're able to get him cheap in your league, I suggest doing it now because it's likely not going to happen ever again. The next game is man, I'm torn on this one right here. It's the Baltimore Ravens against the Denver Broncos. Now, obviously, we have Gary Kubiak going up against his, the team that he was just coaching for. So he knows them pretty well. He didn't pull, a Patriots move, and he didn't have to steal anything. But he is going to be playing against his old team. And Peyton Manning, they're saying, has looked. A lot of people are worried about the offensive line struggles. I think Peyton has overcome that before. I think C.J. Anderson will be leaned on a little bit more now. The Ravens I'm curious to see how their run defense looks without Haloti Ngata. I mean, I know he was aging, but the guy was a Pro Bowl talent for a long time. He was the core of that run stopping unit. So I'm curious to see how they do. So CJ Anderson, he's way too expensive in DFS this week, but I'm playing CJ Anderson, obviously. But the one that I found to be extremely interesting is Steve Smith. Now, Kevin, have you gone back? Did you see the stats from Steve Smith in his previous years, like the games that he played, like in week one?
Yeah. He's had some monster stats, and you could do kind of a first half, second half analysis on him last year, how huge he was in the first half of the season last year. And they really don't have anyone else to throw the ball to. So it could be a really nice game for him.
Right, and he's not going to line up against Chris Harris too often, who is the Broncos slot corner. They're going to try and avoid that. So it should work out for him to see a lot of who is it that he was going to be lining up against. It was going to be Aqib Talib. And Talib he's a physical corner, but he's known to be very, very hit or miss. And Steve Smith, man, these are two guys that are fueled on emotion, Talib and Smith. So it's going to be interesting. Maybe Steve Smith might get kicked out. I don't know.
I was just going to say that's probably the biggest risk there, is that there'll be some punches thrown.
Yes, no, I could actually see that happening between those two. They're both, and that's the thing is, like, Talib is the guy to try and get under your skin. I didn't even really think about that until now, about how bad that could actually work out for Steve Smith owners.
Was that against Talib when he did the ice up thing, or was that somebody else? I can't remember who it was now.
I do not remember. I can't remember for the life of me. But Steve Smith is somebody that I wanted to play just because his week one numbers, like if you haven't seen him, check him out. Instead of me running through him, like basically he's had at least, I think, 14 fantasy points in 6 of his last 7 opening days. Like, it's ridiculous what he's done. But he's been really good. That's a game where there's a lot of question marks that are going to be answered in that game, especially with Peyton Manning and the run game, their offensive line, to see how they work. If they do run the 2 tight end sets as much as people think they will, or if they go 3 wide. I'm curious to see it. Looking forward to a lot of these games just to get the knowledge in there and, go back and analyze it. So the Sunday night game, Giants at Cowboys. 2 offenses that are projected to be, I guess we'll say, high-powered. Joseph Randle, they're saying that he might not even start now. They're saying that Darren McFadden might get the start, but Jason Garrett said it doesn't matter. He's just basically feeding into the fact that they say it's going to be a timeshare. Now, I think I'm in the side where I think they're just waiting for someone to steal that job. I don't think they want it to be a timeshare. I think they want it to be one back, and then they want to use Dunbar in kind of that third down change of pace role. Are you comfortable at all starting Joseph Randle or Darren McFadden this week?
Well, I think the blurbs that have come out have indicated that it would be Darren McFadden who might be starting this week. So comfortable and Darren McFadden are probably 2 words that don't go together. Healthy is probably the third word that doesn't go in there. So this is week 1. He looked good during the preseason. I mean, he looked like his old self as far as he's really fast. He runs around, but then he was even running past his blockers on a lot of these plays. I mean, he has no patience at all. But if they can open up big enough holes for him, I think it's interesting. And this really comes down to how much of coaching and organization can influence who's going to start, because Jerry Jones was out there in the papers raving about Darren McFadden after that week. And if he has a lot of influence, Darren McFadden could be given the first shot at success. And it's an offense where you might only need one shot, even if you're not the greatest talented running back, because Tony Romo in the passing game really opens things up. And the run blocking is amazing there. So I think Darren McFadden is the one guy that I would start of any of them, but I could never be comfortable.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And if I have Joseph Randle, and if there's somebody out there that's a Cowboys fan or somebody that, wanted Randle or something like that, somebody that has McFadden, say, hey, I'll trade you Randle. You want both of them? I'll trade you. And work on a way to get rid of him rather than worry about this every single week. Me personally, I'm rooting for Christine Michael. We all know he was traded to the Cowboys just recently, and I've caught some crap for it, to be honest with you. I even went to work the other day, and when I walked in, everybody's like, oh, Mike, you're Christine Michael. He's going over to Dallas. Who are you trading for him now? Antonio Brown? And I'm like, oh, come on, stop. I did think that it was going to go through the roof, like where people were going to start drafting him in the top 10 rounds, but that never really happened. He was still being drafted late. I had 3 drafts after that, and he went in the 14th round or later. I got him on 2 of those teams. He's a guy like that. Me and Kevin, we talked about this before. The guys that you have on your bench, you want guys that could win you a league when they get an opportunity, kind of like those Devontae Adams players, Cody Latimer's, Dante Moncrief's. And at running back, it's rare to have a guy that may be this talented with that offensive line. If they were comfortable with McFadden, Joseph Randle, they wouldn't have signed a running back. They wouldn't have traded anything. You saw Monty Ball clear waivers. Nobody would trade for him. You saw Terrence West clear waivers. Nobody traded for him. I understand it was just a 7th round pick, but people are forgetting the fact that they still gave up something. And I think the Seahawks were in a position where they had to get rid of somebody, and they figured they'd take something rather than nothing.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good call. It was a conditional 7th round pick, so that's the equivalent of almost nothing. But at the same point in time, just because Seattle wasn't playing him doesn't mean that he's not good. I think you see at the running back position all the time. You saw Justin Forsett come in and really thrive last year when he was finally given the opportunity. And Justin Forsett had been productive before that. So Michael's looked good when he's played, and he hasn't gotten in there. He hasn't played. Maybe rubs people the wrong way in Seattle. Maybe the coaches are looking for something that they're not getting out of him. But running backs are people that can go from one situation to another and really excel. Just because they haven't beaten people out in the past doesn't mean they can in the future. Yeah,
and that was the thing. That was the knock on him. They said there were some of his teammates that even came out afterwards and said, Michael, what the thing is, it's like at the line of scrimmage, that's where his mistakes come in. Once he gets into that second line, it's almost like you talked about with Andre Williams, where he hits that second line of defense and instincts take over, and that. If Andre Williams was playing behind the Dallas offensive line, would Andre Williams be, a legit starting running back in the NFL? 100% yes. And that's why I'm saying is that Christine Michael, he couldn't have went to a better situation. And I'm curious to see how it plays out. He's somebody I'm keeping on the edge of the bench. If you're an RB needy team that you might need to swap out a running back very, very soon, maybe not. But if you have a spot there, if you have deeper benches or a spot that you're just not really, you have an extra tight end or something, throw Christine Michael on there, give him a shot. And I think that conditional pick was what they gave. It's if he's active for, I think, 3 games. I think that was the conditions that'll be met for that draft pick. But in that game between Dallas and the Giants, Odell Beckham, while I've been kind of against taking this guy all year, he really should blow up in week 1, along with Dez Bryant. But Odell Beckham is going to line up against Brandon Carr. Brandon Carr was graded out as a bottom 10 corner in the league last year. And Orlando Scandrick, obviously, he's out for the year for Dallas. This secondary is not equipped to handle Odell Beckham, and he should go bonkers. Am I right in that?
Yeah, I think you're totally right. Actually, Beckham's somebody where I've been doing, I've been doing way too many drafts over the course of the last couple of weeks, and he's someone I wasn't getting enough exposure to, and I've been doing a little bit more recently. I guess you should have known that the the Cruz injury was going to be a little bit worse. It looks like now it's affecting other parts of his leg, as far as now he has a calf injury after he had the patellar tendon. So without Cruz there, I mean, you just see Eli target him relentlessly, and he was targeting him relentlessly in the preseason. I mean, there weren't many receptions, but he was targeting him relentlessly. So if that continues to happen, I just don't think Ruben Randall's going to kind of step up to the next level and really be a huge threat. There's not a lot else to pass to. So he's one of your safer bets at a team that's going to be playing from behind and is going to need to throw a lot. So Beckham is going to continue to live on that amazing volume.
Right, and honestly, you're obviously playing Des Bryant as well in that matchup. Ruben Randall and Terrence Williams, those are the borderline guys that you'd be debating. Me personally, I'd probably rather play Terrence Williams than Ruben Randall. Although Randall, he's going to be that end zone guy. They said Victor Cruz is out. I think they've ruled him out already. I think I heard that earlier today. So if you have Victor Cruz in your lineup, get him out. Get him out. But now we're into the Monday night games. We got 2 Monday night games. This happens every year. We know that. But the first one, the Philadelphia Eagles at the Atlanta Falcons. This is another one where I believe it's going to be a high-scoring affair. I know that Dan Quinn went out to Atlanta, and he's the new head coach there. And I know he's supposed to bring that new defense there and that they're supposed to be better. Well, yeah, they're going to get better, but that doesn't mean that they're going to stop the Eagles on turf. It's even though they're in Atlanta, this game is on turf. Jordan Matthews is going to go off. Is there anybody that you are like dying to see play? Can't wait to see what he does for your fantasy team in this one?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to be starting him in a lot of places, but I'm really interested to see what Tevin Coleman is going to do. It's not a great matchup against Philadelphia, but they've essentially named him the starter. It's another situation, as we kind of talked about earlier, about Matt Jones and some other situations where you have the new staff is in there, the new offensive coordinator, the new head coach, and they drafted him this year, and they had Freeman as being a holdover. And Coleman looked pretty good in the preseason. He broke off a couple of long runs. The offensive line hasn't looked great, but Coleman's been a guy even in college where it takes one big run. So if he gets one crease and he's able to break it with his 4.4 speed, he's somebody who could skyrocket up in value because the Falcons are going to win games this year. I mean, they're not a favorite this week, and it's a bad matchup this week. But if he can lock down that starting running back position, he's a guy who seriously could be a top 15, maybe even top 10 running back if they can win a lot of ball games and give it to him a lot. So I think he's not necessarily someone you want to play, but he's probably the most interesting guy to watch to see what's going to happen the rest of the season.
Yep. And another one, I am interested to see him. And it's funny because during the preseason, he broke off like 2 long runs and everybody's like, oh, so long, Devonta Freeman. And then all of a sudden it was like 2 yards, 3 yards, 1 yard, 3 yards. It was kind of like you just mentioned, and that he's kind of like that boomer bust runner. And it's going to take some time, but the Falcons is a gold mine of an offense. They have options that's going to take away from the run game. He's not going to see 8-man fronts. Julio Jones, there's talk about him. They're going to move him all around the formation now. So I'm interested to see how they use him. I wouldn't be shocked to see Julio Jones get 13 targets in this game, 15 targets. It wouldn't shock me at all. But the one that I said that was going to go off is Jordan Matthews. Jordan Matthews, they had said, he's sticking in the slot. People thought that when Aguilar was drafted that they were going to move Matthews outside. No, they're sticking with him in the slot, and they're proving it. And throughout the preseason, they stuck with him there. When they go too wide, obviously things are a little bit different. But Jordan Matthews, the good part about it is that he, being in the slot, Desmond Trufant doesn't follow receivers into the slot. Trufant is dealing with a shoulder issue, but he's still a pretty decent corner. But going into the slot, Jordan Matthews is going to be going up against Robert Alford. I've said enough. That's all I need to say. Jordan Matthews should eat him alive. Sam Bradford and him have a connection. DeMarco Murray's obviously a start. Ryan Matthews and Darren Sproles on more of a wait-and-see mode. Although it wouldn't shock me to see Sproles go off because in turf against Atlanta, he's familiar with it. He knows the team. I think that Darren Sproles could be a sneaky start.
Yeah, I think Sproles is a guy in PPR I would look to start. And I'm really interested to see what they're going to do with him this year because he looked great in that preseason game against Green Bay. He's a matchup nightmare. They were lining him up out of the slot a lot. I mean, you could argue that he was much more effective. I mean, you don't even have to argue. He was much more effective than LaShawn McCoy last year. And for some reason, they didn't play him down the stretch a lot. So I think he fits in well with that offense. I'm very interested to see what his usage is like because he was running back 25 in PPR leagues last year and only 90-something touches. If they could really get his touch count up this year, he could produce a lot in that offense.
Right. It's almost like they're treating him like a slot receiver opposite of like Matthews. It's almost like a four wide, even though they got two running backs in the field. And they've been doing that throughout the preseason, either keeping Sproles and Matthews on the field or Matthews and Murray. Like they're mixing and matching all over the place. So it would not shock me to see Darren Sproles return to a top 25 PPR option. Wouldn't shock me at all, especially with the play counts that, Philly runs there. But that's, like I said, that's a gold mine for fantasy points. Two not so great secondaries, two great passing attacks. I can't wait to see that one on Monday night. That's an excellent way to close out my week. But there is another game I'll be watching after that, and that's going to be the Vikings at the 49ers. I don't know if that's the way I'd like to end it all the time, but it is going to be fun to watch Adrian Peterson run again, is it not?
Oh yeah, it'll definitely be fun to see him run. I mean, we've gotten some news today that I believe the center in Minnesota is now going to IR to return. They had a couple of other injuries on the offensive line. I don't know what to make of this 49ers team across the board with all of the shakeup and the chaos that's been going on there. But of course, traditionally, they've been somebody who's been a stout run defense. So it'll be interesting to see what Peterson can do as some shakeup in the offensive line there. And I'm really interested to see what the 49ers offense is going to do. Kaepernick is really fading a lot in drafts. He's almost in the mid-second tier of quarterbacks, I would say, meaning mid-quarterback 2 is where he's going to low sometimes. He's really just not, people aren't excited about him. He didn't look great during the preseason, but maybe they'll actually open things up a little bit on offense. I mean, he's somebody who ran for 600-plus yards last year, so there might be a decent running floor, and he has Torrey Smith there, so that's obviously a big upgrade on Crabtree, who we talked about before, and who can stretch the field. So I'm hoping he puts something together, because we have seen times in the past, like Eli Manning last year, where he looked awful during the preseason. It was kind of a new offense, some changing of personnel, and then he was able to turn it on during the regular season. So maybe Kaepernick can look good. He's probably a guy that I'm focused in on there.
And that's a weird part with me. When I actually did my projections for the season, I go through and like every single player on every team, I'm trying to figure out what I project him for, and not comparing him to anybody, but like when I went through the numbers and then I added up what that would mean in terms of fantasy points, Kaepernick showed up as a top 10 option, and I couldn't rank him there because I just don't trust the guy. But he is really, really like a legitimate option as a QB1 if you're stacked everywhere else. Their team is going to be playing from behind. Supposedly, their pass rushers that have stepped in to replace some of these guys, they look like they're going to be good. But their run-stopping unit, I don't know if it's there. I don't know if they're going to be stopping the run. Obviously, Peterson, that's killer. Losing his center and left tackle. Like, these are just two big positions that they're arguing. Like, obviously, the right tackle is more important to a running back than the left. But Peterson has made it work with less before. It does take him down a notch. But I think the floor for Adrian Peterson in week 1 is 100 yards and a touchdown. I think that's his floor. Like, I just don't see him not scoring on Monday Night Football, returning from everything that's kind of gone on with the NFL. And he's going to be involved more in the passing game. I think I'm a little bit more scared for Bridgewater with the offensive line, to be honest with you, because that's rough. Because I think we were all looking forward to seeing what, if he would take that step forward in the second year. I mean, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think he has been very effective, though, getting the ball out of his hand. And there's a lot of evidence that points to the quarterback being a bigger factor in whether or not they take a sack than the offensive line. I mean, if you have certain guys who get the ball out of their hand quickly, who make good, quick decisions, and it seems like Bridgewater excels at that, that's really the main way to avoid sacks. Of course, it helps to have good protection, but he's a guy who makes those good decisions. So hopefully he won't be affected that much.
Agreed, you guys, and that's going to wrap up the first podcast, the first one. Well, not the first podcast, but the first one of the NFL season. I think we're all excited to get the season underway. If you, like I said, I know I've touted it a few times, and I see all the work that goes into it. Kevin and I are both writing 2 articles a week. Kevin's doing a whole bunch of stat analysis. I'm doing the fantasy stock market. If you guys want to check out all that action, we write it in depth, in detail, break it down for you so that you see all of that, along with Mike Clay, Jeff Radcliffe, Jody Smith. There is so many talented individuals in this team. Make sure to sign up for Fantasy Gold. Make sure you guys can also follow us on Stitcher, Blog Talk Radio. You can watch the show on YouTube where you could see our beautiful faces. You could also watch on Fantasy Sports Network, as well as subscribing on PFF Radio. Again, Kevin, you could follow him at Cole_Kev, myself at Mike Tagliere NFL. If you are not on Twitter, when you're playing fantasy football, you're doing it wrong. Kevin, do you have any things you want to say before we get out of here?
No, I just say that I am so ready for the season to start, and hopefully at least one or two of my predictions will come true.
No, absolutely. We're looking forward to it. Guys, those draft boards that you were looking at, analyzing, they mean nothing now because the season is starting. Get out there and win yourselves week 1, and we are going to be back to see you in week 2. So long, guys. Lights out.
Take care.